That morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds, gently illuminating the kitchen. Nothing felt out of the ordinary. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint fragrance of perfume in the air. Samantha stood with her back to me, her hair cascading over her shoulders, the beige silk robe clinging to her form. She didn't turn at the sound of my footsteps, but her voice was sweet, as always. "Don't forget dinner with Dad tonight. 6 o'clock. Dress nice." I just nodded slightly, saying little. It was one of those mornings where everything seemed too perfect to question. The steaming coffee cup in her hand, her lips curved into a small smile, not too wide, not too intimate, just enough that I didn't register, something both unfamiliar and cold. I kissed her lightly on the cheek before leaving the apartment. She remained there, leaning against the kitchen counter, almost as if trying to hold me in that moment. But no, she just smiled and murmured, "Good luck with the pitch today." The elevator door slid shut. I had no idea it was the last time I'd leave that apartment as her husband. The Monroe Development building loomed in the morning sun like a colossal fortress of glass and steel. Each floor glittered with reflections, bouncing light onto the sidewalk below as if to remind anyone entering. This place belonged to power. I used to think I was part of it. I used to believe it. I walked into the lobby like any other day, but this time, my key card didn't work. A short, sharp beep, then a red light. I tried again, nothing. The receptionist, young, a little flustered, made a quick call. "Mr. Grayson, Mr. Monroe wants to see you immediately." 16th floor conference room. Before I could even ask why, I saw two people from HR already waiting by the elevator banks. One of them was Karen, who'd bought me coffee during project meetings. Today, she looked at me like a name just crossed off a list. The conference room was uncomfortably silent. Gerald Monroe, my father-in-law, and the CEO, stood with his back to the window. The large pane of glass reflected the bright sky behind him, as though he were contemplating things far grander than the man standing behind him. "Ethan," he said without turning, "today is your last day." I frowned. "No prior notice?" "Not necessary," he replied. "Your severance package will be wired. Someone will escort you from the building." He turned just as I asked, "Does Sam know about this?" A flicker of a smile crossed his face, devoid of emotion, just the artificial curve of power. Soon enough, I didn't say anything else. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't believe this was actually happening. An hour later, my key card was officially deactivated. My internal email account wiped clean. My work phone dead to data access. I drove home, my mind still trying to piece together the fragments of what had just shattered. The front door was slightly ajar. Inside, empty, half the furniture gone. The closets raided. The wedding photo that hung in the living room vanished. On the kitchen counter sat a white envelope. Samantha's handwriting. I opened it. Just one sentence. "I can't do this anymore. Please don't call me." No explanation. No tears. No trace. I stood there, in the apartment that was once her home. The apartment that had been filled with laughter and late-night dinners. Now, only the whir of the ceiling fan and the lonely yellow glare of a single lamp remained. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe a few minutes. Maybe a lifetime. I took off my jacket, laid it on the chair, the one Sam used to curl up in with a book. But now, it felt cold, like an exhibit in a silent museum. I walked past the bedroom, then turned back. It felt like walking through a dream, or more accurately, a nightmare programmed to self-destruct. Three things echoed in my head. Fired. Left. Erased. I slid down the wall, sitting on the floor. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden stripe across one side of the blinds. The room became so quiet I could hear my own breathing, short, ragged, then slowly evening out. No one called. No new messages. My bank account showed a zero balance. I opened the filing cabinet. Legal papers, contracts, project plans, all still there, untouched, but meaningless now. Every digital footprint I'd ever left had been wiped from their system. The apartment suddenly felt like the scene of a disappearance, and I was the one who had vanished. Ethan Grayson, 41, former project director, former husband of Samantha Monroe, former son-in-law of Gerald Monroe. I looked around the room again, not searching for answers this time, just confirming the reality. I had just been deliberately erased from my own life. I pulled out my phone, ready to call someone, my mom, an old friend, anyone. But I stopped. Every name in my contacts seemed to dissolve in the shock. The sky outside deepened to an ash purple. The city kept moving, kept running. But for me, time felt frozen. The first night of a betrayed man began with silence. And that silence, later, would nurture someone entirely different within me. I left the apartment near midnight. Didn't take much, just a small suitcase, 3 changes of clothes, my old laptop, some papers, and the little cash left in my wallet. The city at night was still bright, still noisy, still indifferent. Streetlights smeared across the car window like memories being wiped away, one by one. I picked a motel just off the southern highway. A flickering neon sign, a long hallway smelling of dampness and mildew, carpet stained with dust and dried coffee. Room 209 had a small window overlooking the parking lot. Inside, a single bed, a rickety desk, a bedside lamp that flickered whenever a truck rumbled past. I sat on the bed without turning on the light. Outside, rain began to fall, soft taps at first, then steadier, like a clock counting down to something inevitable. The first feeling wasn't anger or fear. It was emptiness, but only for a few minutes. I opened my suitcase, flipped up the false bottom, and retrieved the small black USB drive. Unmarked, unlabeled, but I knew exactly what it was. A key. A relic from a part of my life I thought was buried forever. Plugging it into the laptop, I typed a sequence my fingers still remembered, though I hadn't used it in nearly 7 years. The screen lit up. An old icon appeared, a slowly rotating encryption lattice, followed by a small line of text. Echo, welcome back. I used to be Echo. My call sign from a special unit, specializing in high-level security analysis and system breaches. When I left, I'd locked down all the data, severed the connections permanently. But I knew someday I might need to come back. I didn't sleep that night. The rain outside was relentless, punctuated by gusts of wind whistling through the old window frame. The flickering light from the parking lot cast just enough illumination for me to see my reflection, faint on the laptop screen. I didn't recognize the man staring back. I started with the bank account, the joint one with Samantha. Nothing. No trace. Transaction history wiped. But I know how to recover data, layer by layer. I dug deeper. Found a strange transfer from a few days ago to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, held by a shell corporation, but I recognized the originating IP address as one used previously by someone in Samantha's old contact list. I moved to her phone. Even though it had been wiped, I'd installed a deep-level backup system years ago, automatically logging background activity. And there it was, location history. 3 days before I was fired, Samantha had been at Monroe HQ near midnight. She left after more than 2 hours. She told me she was meeting an old girlfriend that night. I'd even believed her. A long-deleted email, recovered through a fragmented data key I used to use, was addressed to Gerald, Monroe, private, with the subject, Postmarch Gala Plan. I couldn't read the whole thing, but the last line was clear. After he's gone, things will be smoother. I knew who he was, and I knew gone wasn't accidental. Around 3 a.m., I was sitting alone on the floor. The keyboard still glowed, lines of code scrolled by, old data slowly piecing itself together. The light from the screen cast my shadow long against the wall, like a scar. Outside, the rain fell harder. Distant thunder rumbled like warning bells, steady, cold. I opened a file encrypted with 2 layers. The internal schematics of Monroe HQ. The sub-basements, the utility tunnels, the camera blind spots. I'd helped design them years ago as a security consultant for the tech division. All still there. Unupdated. They thought I had stepped back. They forgot I built the walls I was now planning to walk through. I restored a system called Shadow Layer, a covert retrieval platform allowing access to internal traffic monitoring if you had root privileges. It took exactly 8 minutes to breach the company network again. Firewalls unchanged, encryption outdated. I started collecting executive emails, financial data, secret meeting logs. My name, Ethan Grayson, was barely mentioned in any of it. But Echo was. In one internal memo, ensure Echo cannot trace link between Jude and Samantha. Jude. The name hit like a needle piercing the silence of the night. Who was Jude? I vaguely recalled a past operation. A fixer, an information broker, tied to a black market deal in Romania. No one knew his real name. But now, I had a feeling he hadn't disappeared. Maybe he was the shadow behind all of this. Near dawn, I stood up. My spine ached, but my mind was alarmingly clear. I opened the window. Cold wind slapped my face, carrying the smell of rain, wet asphalt, and the metallic tang of old, sleepless nights. I looked down at the desk. On it lay a cold cup of coffee, a pistol fitted with a suppressor, and the digital map of Monroe HQ. I wasn't a project manager anymore. Not a husband. Not a son-in-law. Not even an ordinary man. I was Echo. And this time, I wasn't coming back for forgiveness. I don't remember how many hours it took to find that video footage. Only that when I did, the sky outside had bled from gray to orange, then deepened into the bruised blue of another encroaching night. In a data file that looked like nothing more than work schedules, I found a subfolder labeled Meetings_Review. Clips recorded from internal cameras, grainy angles, weak audio, but clear enough to hear and understand. I opened the first clip. Gerald Monroe's office appeared, top floor, where no employee entered without a formal invitation. The room was quiet, recessed lighting gleaming off the massive glass wall behind his desk. And then she walked in. Samantha. I knew that walk. That familiar black dress, the slight sideways glance as if assessing everything. She didn't knock. Just opened the door, entered, and smiled. Not the smile I knew. She poured 2 drinks, moving as if she owned the place. Perched on her father's desk, crossed her legs, leaned down to hand Gerald a glass. I felt the air in the motel room thicken, like a weight pressing on my chest. They started talking, voices indistinct but punctuated by laughter, the clink of glasses. Samantha placed a hand on his shoulder, leaning in to whisper something. Gerald nodded, his eyes sharp, cold as a blade. Then the footage cut to a different scene, a smaller conference room, dimmer lighting. Samantha stood beside a large screen, presenting something. I zoomed in on the notes below. Phase 2. Redirect assets. I paused the video. My heart was pounding, but not with surprise. With the sickening certainty of pieces clicking into place, I navigated back to the attached files within the system. An untitled audio file. I opened it. It was Samantha's voice. I recognized it instantly. Calm, measured, devoid of emotion. She was talking on the phone, or maybe recording a message for someone. After the March Gala, everything proceeds on schedule. Ethan won't suspect a thing. He trusts me. Jude just needs to handle the rest. I stopped. Jude. That name again, this time spoken by the person I'd trusted most. Back then, I hadn't known exactly who he was. But deep down, I began to understand. Samantha wasn't acting alone. And what chilled me wasn't just the betrayal, but the sheer coldness of her execution. Everything I thought was real. The smiles, the evenings together, the small questions like, "Have you eaten yet?" All just an act. I don't remember how long I sat motionless after hearing that recording. In the dark room, only the laptop screen glowed like a mask ripped away, forcing me to look. I pulled up another clip. This time, footage of Samantha holding my key card, the one I thought I'd lost, and handing it to a nondescript man in a gray suit. No clear view of his face. Just his hand taking the card and pocketing it. I froze the frame. In the corridor lighting, a long shadow stretched on the wall behind them. That shadow wasn't familiar, but it felt significant. I opened another window, scanned the fingerprints logged from recent card swipes in the internal system. One didn't match any employee, but the identifier was tagged Visitor, JC. JC, Jude Callahan? I couldn't be sure yet, but the name was no longer an echo. It was the hidden link. And Samantha was the connection. I switched to the financial data. A massive sum transferred from an internal development fund to a series of foreign accounts, all legitimized by a digital signature. But when I extracted the root signature data, I went cold. It was my signature. I had never signed off on it. But the system recorded it as mine. It had been forged, using the exact handwriting sample I'd provided for internal documents years ago. They weren't just cutting me out of my own life. They were setting me up as the fall guy for Monroe Development's entire clandestine money laundering and asset manipulation scheme. I opened a new text document, typing each word onto the screen like a silent declaration to myself. They think they ended it. But they forgot. I am not easily erased. The rain outside hadn't stopped. Wind battered the motel window, making it rattle softly, as if urging me forward, or maybe testing if I still had the strength to stand. I knew I needed one more thing, confirmation from outside the system. I dug through an old file, a list of personnel who had worked in Monroe's surveillance systems. There was one name I'd flagged years ago, Nova Blake. Back then, I never thought I'd need her. But now, she was the only one I knew, who wasn't on anyone's payroll. I picked up my phone, dialing an old number I kept encrypted. No answer. I left a short, encrypted message. Need help. It's real. If you still owe me one, now's the time. I didn't know if she still used that number. Didn't know if she'd get the message. But I hoped, because if I was right, the next phase of this game wasn't just personal anymore. I wasn't just a man scorned by his wife and fired by his father-in-law anymore. I was the target in a transnational money laundering operation, and they had just woken something they never anticipated. The message I sent Nova didn't get an immediate reply. Part of me figured she never would. It made sense. Someone like Nova, Once she went off-grid, stayed off-grid. But if she still owed me one, if that old trust hadn't completely eroded, then maybe, just maybe, she'd surface. I left the phone untouched, digging deeper into Monroe's internal systems. The further I went, the clearer it became that the power structure wasn't just a company. It was a labyrinth. And at the center, a nexus point connecting three names: Gerald, Samantha, and someone initialed only as JC. I traced trails from encrypted internal emails to coded interdepartmental transfers. Among the command strings sent from the building's top floor, one sequence routed to an IP address previously associated with an anonymous entity in the Balkans. The sender's name? Samantha Monroe. The moment I confirmed that connection linked to an intermediary server codenamed Callahan Hub, my burner phone vibrated. Not a call, just a text message. Midnight. Eastside Old Observatory. I didn't need confirmation. I just needed to be on time. The observatory was long abandoned, perched on a hill about 30 miles outside the city, once used for skywatching during the Cold War. Now just decaying concrete, rusted iron columns, and an exposed spiral staircase leading up to a tower of cracked glass. I arrived exactly at midnight, unarmed. Just the USB drive with everything I'd gathered. Nova was waiting on the top level, deep in shadow, a long, charcoal gray coat buttoned to her neck, hair pulled back tightly. Her eyes were the same as I remembered, wary, trusting no one, including me. "You look worse than I pictured," she said, her voice raspy like wine through a rusted vent. I handed her the USB drive. "Skip the pleasantries. Just tell me if I'm crazy." Nova plugged the drive into a rugged tablet she carried. Her eyes scanned the data streams methodically. No questions, no comments. Not until she reached the clip of Samantha handing the key card to the mysterious man. Nova frowned slightly. "You know who he is?" she asked. "My guess is Jude Callahan." She was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "He's more than just a data broker. He's a ghost in the machine. A kingmaker. Behind disappearances, broken contracts. Usually leaves no trace. But I've crossed his shadow twice. Both times, someone vanished." Wind howled through the observatory dome, a long, eerie whistle like stressed steel cables. We stood in silence, the only sound the soft hum of the tablet processing files. "I'm not sure what Jude wants with me," I said. "But if he's in this deep, it means I stumbled onto something big enough to get his attention." Nova tilted her head, studying me. "No, he's not playing because of what you stumbled onto. He's playing because of who you used to be. What you know makes you a threat." I nodded slowly. "I need someone who can break through the deeper security layers inside Monroe's network. And I need someone who isn't for sale." Nova looked at me for a long moment, then spoke deliberately. "You still have the ghost root access codes?" "Yes. And I've rebuilt the double encryption. Then we have a chance." That night, we didn't go back to the motel. We drove straight to an abandoned warehouse down by the old docks, a place Nova had set up as a mobile command center. Inside were 3 large monitors, 2 compact server racks, and a set of data relay equipment she'd patched into the industrial power grid. No public internet, no easily traceable connections. All signals ran through a private encrypted channel she called the 13th rib. We sat in silence, the only sound the steady drone of cooling fans. I began walking Nova through the deepest system layers I'd already breached, places no one seemed to have touched, according to the system logs. In a hidden document cache, we found the Ghost Fund Initiative, a complex chain of shell corporations, reverse transfer accounts, and a network of dummy investments set up under my digital identity. And right there, on the first page, were 3 digital signatures: Gerald Monroe, Samantha Monroe, and J. Callahan. Nova looked at me. "They didn't just betray you. They built you into their shield." My hands tightened into fists. It felt like being forced into a play where my role was the pathetic fool destined to take the fall for an entire empire. "We break it from the inside," Nova said, her voice hard as steel. "But slowly, quietly. Let them think they're still winning." I looked at the screen. An image of Samantha flashed up from an old video file, radiant as she raised a champagne flute, confident beside her father at a contract signing. I didn't recognize that woman anymore. I turned to Nova. "You sure we can do this?" She didn't answer right away. Just quietly typed a string of code, then looked back at me. "If they operate in the shadows," she said quietly, "then we become the thing shadows fear." I didn't smile. I didn't have it in me anymore. We began. And this time, I wasn't alone. 3 days after teaming up with Nova, things seemed under control. We'd re-established covert surveillance, set up decoy access points to misdirect any internal sweeps, and we're building a back channel to siphon data from Gerald's personal servers to external, untraceable locations. The plan was to disrupt their operations subtly, sow seeds of doubt within Monroe's inner circle. But the first move didn't come from them. It came for me. That morning, I woke to a faint vibration from my pocket. Not my main phone. The burner, the one-way device for untraceable contacts. A single text message glowed on the screen. Echo. You're not in the shadows anymore. No sender number. No area code. No way to trace the origin. I scanned the room. Still the old warehouse, iron door secured with 3 deadbolts, no unusual signals detected. Nova was asleep, head resting on a makeshift cushion on the console. I switched off the burner, tucked it back into an inner pocket, and sat down. But a heavy feeling settled in my chest. Not fear. Recognition. He'd found me. Jude. Only he used my old call sign. Only he knew I was once Echo. And only he would send a warning without a threat, because for him, the warning was the threat. I woke Nova with a light touch on her shoulder. Her eyes snapped open, instantly alert. We've got company, I said quietly. We're being watched. She didn't ask who. Didn't panic. Just reached into a metal cabinet, grabbed her Glock, chambered around, double-checked the door locks, and killed all the main lights. We waited. The silence stretched for over 10 minutes. No strange sounds outside. No passing cars. But I could feel it. Someone had brushed against our perimeter without leaving a physical trace. Nova activated a signal sweeper. A tiny blip appeared on the screen. Faint, but definite. A strange device had pinged nearby on a short burst frequency, then vanished. Untraceable, but close. We packed up in under 5 minutes. Wordlessly. Data transferred to encrypted external drives. We left nothing behind, not even fingerprints. Outside the warehouse, we split up. I took the car south, while Nova took her motorcycle, looping east to muddy the signal trail. The plan was to rendezvous in 12 hours at a truck stop near Tallahassee. I drove for nearly 6 hours straight. Every red light, I checked the rearview mirror. Not because I expected a tail car, but because if it was Jude, he didn't need to follow. He just needed me to doubt myself into making a mistake. Around 10 p.m., I pulled into a small roadside motel. Run down, paint peeling, the clerk an elderly woman who wouldn't remember my face 5 minutes after I checked in. I took room 9, locked the door manually, then rigged a simple motion sensor alarm using techniques I learned back in Iraq. I'd just finished setting it up when the burner phone vibrated again. This time, an attachment. I didn't open it directly. Connected the phone to a secondary laptop running a sandboxed OS. It took almost 2 minutes to decrypt, but when the video played, I froze. Nova, tied to a chair, mouth taped shut, a trickle of blood on her forehead. She looked up, directly into the camera. Her eyes were clear, defiant, not panicked, but Nova was supposed to be miles away. She texted me less than 2 hours ago. I immediately called her secure line. It rang 3 times, then she picked up. What's wrong? Her voice was cool and sharp. I paused for a beat. Where are you? Rest stop 7, by the red billboard sign. Waiting for you. I forwarded the video file. A minute later, Nova called back. It's a deepfake, she said, her voice tight. Every micro-expression is mine. But I've never owned that shirt. Never been in that room. I leaned back against the wall. The cold concrete seeped through my shirt. Jude wasn't just watching. He was fabricating reality, piece by piece, designed to make us doubt each other. They're not trying to kill us, I said, my voice low. They're trying to erase us. From the ground up. Nova was silent for a moment. We need a dead man switch. Something that triggers data release if everything goes south. Already set, I replied. But we need another layer. If we get separated, the other needs to be able to proceed without the primary command code. Agreed. The call ended. I stood up, looked out the window. Outside, the night was thick and dark. No cars, no lights, just the flickering neon sign of the motel. A weak red glow, like blood diluted in cold water. I realized my breathing was shallow, fast, not from fear, but because I was stepping back into a world I'd sworn to leave behind. A place with no rules. Only the quick and the desperate. Jude had stepped out of the shadows, and from now on, this wasn't a plan anymore. This was survival. The annual Monroe Development Gala was always orchestrated like a ritual. From the red carpet leading into the main hall to the warm, golden tone lighting, every detail broadcast the same message. This was an empire of power, wealth, and control. This year was no different. The grand ballroom of the Aurora Plaza Hotel glittered like a crystal palace. Beneath sparkling chandeliers mingled hundreds of guests, Men in perfectly tailored suits, women in shimmering silver gowns, the soft clink of champagne flutes, the smooth current of jazz floating like the breath of a flawless evening. On stage, the red velvet curtain was ready to part for Gerald Monroe, the chairman who would once again assert the corporation's soft power before unveiling the Crown Tower real estate project, the symbol of their global ambition. I wasn't in the ballroom. I was 2 blocks away, inside a converted utility van, our mobile command center. Nova sat beside me, the glow of 6 monitors reflecting on her face, sharp and focused. The main screen showed live feeds from 3 covert cameras inside the ballroom, a direct link to the stage's presentation server, and finally, the controls for a live stream broadcast. On my lap rested the laptop containing over 100 gigabytes of data. Video, audio, accounting ledgers, asset maps, and the damning recordings related to the Ghost Fund, the network of money laundering accounts created under my name, operated by Gerald, Samantha, and Jude. I checked my watch. 9:15 p.m. You sure about this? Nova asked quietly. I nodded. The second he steps onto that stage, we start. She didn't ask again, just tightened her grip on the control stick, ready to switch the feeds. Outside, the night pressed in. Headlights swept past, distant sirens wailed, wind whispered through the van's vents, creating a strange soundtrack for the end of a power game that had gone on too long. Then, on screen, Gerald Monroe walked onto the stage. The lights shifted to a spotlight, focusing on that familiar face. Impeccable black suit, dark blue tie, his expression as confident as a politician entering an election cycle. Behind him, the new project logo. Crown, the pinnacle of tomorrow. Gerald began to speak. His voice was deep, clear, every word carefully chosen. Ladies and gentlemen, this year marks a turning point. Monroe Corporation is not just reaching further, but becoming stronger, more transparent. I flipped the first switch. The massive screen behind the stage flickered, then filled with static. A ripple of confusion went through the audience. Some assumed it was a technical glitch. Gerald glanced back, frowning slightly. A technician rushed from the wings, but was stopped by security as planned. The control systems were no longer in their hands. 10 seconds later, the first video played. It was Gerald, on a secure line in a private meeting. Account 12 needs to be cleared by 1800 hours. Use the Grayson authorization. He signed off without knowing. A few nervous laughs, not because it was funny, but because they couldn't yet believe it was real. This was followed by images, transfer confirmations, shell company names, IP trails leading back to Gerald's own office servers. The murmur rippled through the crowd, growing louder. Some people pulled out phones, recording the screen. Others subtly shifted away from the front rows, as if proximity alone could taint them. Then came Samantha, the clip of her entering the office late at night, carrying a briefcase, handing the key card to the man in the gray suit. Jude, though his face remained obscured. Followed by the audio recording. Post-gala, we extract. Ethan will be irrelevant. His name is already on the transfer logs. Gerald turned, looking towards the lighting booth, but the operators could only shake their heads. All access was locked. At that moment, Nova switched the feed, broadcasting everything live to an open platform, the live stream hitting 33,000 viewers and climbing. The final blow, Jude's voice, slightly distorted but clear. Echo won't know what hit him. We need him intact long enough to take the fall. Gerald stumbled back a step, his mouth working silently. On the screen, I triggered the final frame. Plain white text on a black background. Hello again, Gerald. He froze. His eyes darted around the room, searching for me. No one could see me, but he knew. I was watching. Backstage, lights flickered erratically. Some guests were already leaving. A few reporters began filming openly. Monroe's biggest night of the year had become the stage for the empire's public implosion. Gerald gasped for breath, gripping the microphone stand. This is not real. It's doctored footage. It's fake. But the denial rang hollow. Not while the videos kept playing, while each piece of evidence was timestamped and sourced. Not while the building's own systems were broadcasting his downfall. I pulled off my headset, looked at Nova. Now he knows what it feels like to be erased. She just gave a slight nod. On the monitor, Gerald collapsed into a chair behind the curtain. Security guards scrambled around him. Samantha wasn't at the gala, but I knew she was watching, and the final video package I'd arranged would arrive for her within the hour. A USB drive, packaged like a gift, containing the full dossier of her complicity in setting the trap meant to destroy me. I didn't need to be there to see her smile fade. I didn't need to stand before Gerald to see his hands tremble. I just needed the world to see what I'd known all along. They were never invincible. They were just people. And this time, the hunted had become the hunter. After the gala, Gerald's world collapsed almost instantly. Media swarmed like sharks sensing blood. Major stockholders announced they were pulling out. Company accounts were temporarily frozen pending investigation. And within 48 hours, Monroe Development was embroiled in a federal investigation. I should have felt satisfaction. Vindicated, but I didn't, because as the mask of power fell away, I saw clearly what I was up against, not just a selfish father-in-law or a treacherous wife, but an entire system built on manipulation, control, and the erasure of anyone deemed disposable. And Jude Callahan still hadn't surfaced. I knew he wouldn't hide for long. Someone like Jude, he didn't live in the shadows by hiding. He hid to observe, to adjust, to wait for the perfect moment, to strike again. That evening, an envelope appeared. No postmark, no delivery person seen. Just placed neatly outside the door of the temporary apartment I was renting in a quiet Savannah alley. Inside were photos of me, standing in line for coffee, opening my car door, glancing at a laptop in a roadside diner. There was even one of Nova, focused intently inside the old storage unit back in Tallahassee. All taken within the last week. No threats, no signature, just a small slip of paper clipped to the top. You're not the only one who knows how to play chess, Ghost. I laid the photos on the table, silent for a few seconds. The photos were unsigned, but they bore a signature. The angles, the lighting, the framing, all Jude's style. He wasn't hiding. He was drawing a circle, tightening it around me. I opened a map and circled all the locations shown in the photos. Each fell within the limited broadcast radius of old Cold War-era relay stations, systems long decommissioned and removed from public records. Only someone like Jude would remember those ghost networks. I called Nova. She wasn't surprised. Her voice was low. He's not trying to scare you. He's trying to flush you out. I sighed. And I can't keep running. 3 days later, I walked into an abandoned parking garage beneath a defunct casino in Atlantic City. In the dim, flickering sodium light, Jude was waiting. Long coat, gloves, hair slightly messy as if he'd just woken from a nap. Flanked by 2 silent men, unmoving, unblinking, like shadows given form. "Welcome back, Ghost," he said, clapping softly 3 times, his tone casual, almost friendly. I didn't respond, just tossed a small hard drive towards him. "You know what's on that?" I asked. Jude raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Copies of the Ghost Fund, transaction authentications, old server data. And I'm sure a few incriminating audio files." I nodded. "Excellent," he smiled. "So, what's the problem?" "I already sent 5 copies out. To 5 different places. 2 of them are agencies you used to play games with." The smile on Jude's face faded slightly, but his eyes never left mine. "Why not just end it here?" he asked. "You disappear. I disappear. Mutually beneficial." "No," I said, "because this isn't about me anymore. It's about everyone you've manipulated, everyone set up like me, like Nova, like anyone who didn't get a choice." Jude stepped closer, extending a hand as if to clap me on the shoulder. "You've changed. Not Echo anymore. You might win a battle, but not the war." I took a step back, pulling a small remote device from my jacket pocket. 2 minutes ago, I said slowly, I activated a dormant code buried in your old data archives, the ones you thought were wiped." Jude's eyes narrowed. I continued. "From now on, every transaction channel linked to your network is tagged. Traceable. You can't move money. Can't pay anyone off. Can't disappear." His hands clenched at his sides. "You don't want to kill me, Jude," I said. "Because if I disappear, everything goes public instantly. But as long as you're out there, I can still pull your strings." In that moment, I wasn't the one running anymore. I was setting the terms. Jude stared at me for a long time. Then, slowly, he stepped back. He didn't say another word. He knew he'd lost, not because he wasn't clever enough, but because he underestimated the man once known as Echo, the one he thought was easiest to manipulate. I walked out of the garage in silence. No gunfire, no bloodshed, just the quiet end of an old cycle. That night, back in my small room, I turned on my laptop and logged into the interface of a new platform, an encrypted network where victims could anonymously submit documents, evidence, testimony. I called it the Shield Protocol. My name wasn't on it. No picture, no flashy logo. Just a virtual door for those who had been threatened into silence. Now, they had a place to speak. I hadn't chosen revenge. I'd chosen to change the rules of the game. One early autumn morning, I drove out of the city before the sun was fully up. The roads were empty, mist hanging thin like a memory half faded, half lingering. Wind whispered past the car windows, carrying the cool, damp scent of grass and earth after a light night rain. I didn't turn on the radio. Just the steady hum of the engine and the sigh of wind through a cracked window, like my own long breath. I stopped the car on a low hill where a solitary old oak stood in an open field. No signs, no clear path, but I found it. It used to be part of an old military training ground, now abandoned. Nobody came here anymore, which was why I chose it. I got out, carrying a small wooden box. Inside were 3 items. The white gold wedding band, once a symbol of a promise I believed in more than myself. My old military dog tags, stamped Ethan Grayson, special unit designation, marking the day I officially became Echo, and one final USB drive, holding the last backup of everything I had gathered, decoded, endured. I wasn't here to erase. I was here for closure. I dug a small hole at the base of the tree. The earth was soft, moist, the loamy smell of decaying leaves and roots bringing back memories like quiet waves. I placed the box inside, no prayer, no ceremony. Just silence and an internal agreement that this was necessary. I filled the earth back in, layer by layer, handful by handful, not rushing, not hesitating. When the ground was covered, I sat down, leaned back against the oak's trunk, feeling like I was resting against a piece of time itself that had accepted my retreat. The sky slowly brightened. Thin rays of sun filtered through the sparse leaves, touching my face, cool from the morning breeze. I closed my eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to memorize this feeling. The feeling of not being rushed, of not being hunted, of having nothing left to prove. After a while, I stood up, brushed the dirt from my hands, and walked back to the truck. Nova was waiting in the cab. She didn't ask what I'd done or what had ended. She just handed me a hot paper cup of coffee, the lid slightly dented, like every other coffee we'd grabbed on rushed trips. I took it, inhaling deeply. Any news? I asked. She nodded. The courts accepted the warrant for Jude. Some assets frozen. Gerald's facing additional transnational money laundering charges. Samantha vanished from all social media 12 hours ago. I didn't say anything, just took a sip of coffee, the bitterness sharp in my throat. Thought you'd be relieved, Nova said. I shook my head slightly. No, just done. We sat there for a while in silence. The coffee cooled. Neither of us was in a hurry to leave. Then Nova touched the small laptop screen mounted on the dash, opening a data window. A map appeared, dotted with small, glowing points across the country, each point representing an individual, a group, a unit, anonymously submitting data about injustice, threats, things they'd never dared to voice before. The SHIELD protocol was active, without my name, without my face. I was just the conduit, the transfer point between the truth and those who needed it. Nova looked up. Think you're doing the right thing? I nodded. Because for the first time in a long time, I'm not fighting just to save myself. She gave a small smile. Good. Because I wouldn't know what else to do but keep going. The truck started rolling, pulling away from the field. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The oak tree still stood there, steady against the sky turning pale pink. Like a quiet sentinel guarding what was buried, what was painful, what had been lost, and what had finally been stitched back together by will alone. A week later, I arrived in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of Nashville. A light breeze stirred the flags hanging from front porches. Flower beds were neatly tended, kids rode bikes around a small park. Everything here felt peaceful, as if the underworld, betrayal, and data wars didn't exist. I got out of the car and walked into a small office tucked into a row of red brick buildings. No large sign, just a simple brass plaque engraved. SB Communications. Inside was an old wooden desk, an empty bookshelf, a small server rack humming quietly through a test run, and a secure Dropbox. I booted up the server, downloaded the first submission, an anonymous whistleblower in Detroit, detailing fraudulent labor contracts for immigrant workers. I didn't know who he was, but I knew one thing. He was starting from where I once stood, a place where no one seemed to be listening. I wasn't going to save the world. I didn't need recognition. I just needed to ensure that people like Jude, like Gerald, like Samantha, couldn't keep rewriting the narrative to suit themselves without someone pushing back, saying, enough. Later that afternoon, as I left the office, I paused near a small house towards the end of the street. A brass wind chime hung from the porch, tinkling softly in the breeze. Inside, an old man sat by the window, holding a mug of hot tea, his gaze distant but clear. I'd helped him once. A man whose land Monroe's subsidiaries tried to seize through predatory bankruptcy tactics. Now, he lived here peacefully, with his small house, a vegetable garden out back, and a spirit that held no bitterness. He looked up, saw me, Didn't speak, just gave a slight nod, raising his teacup in silent acknowledgement. I nodded back. No words needed. No stories retold. The story was closed. I walked on, hands in my jacket pockets. No rush. No urgency. The wind moved through my hair, across my shoulders, carrying the faint sound of the wind chime fading behind me. I wasn't Echo anymore. Not the Ethan Grayson from before. I was the person behind the firewall, holding the door open for those who needed their truth heard. And this time, I was choosing to stay,